10 candidates will take the stage tonight in Detroit for night one of the second round of Democratic primary debates. The group's polling leaders, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, they're going to be center stage. Next to them will be South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke. At either end of the stage will be spiritual guru Marianne Williamson and Montana Governor Steve Bullock. He missed the cut for the last debate. It'll be the first time that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren face off in a debate. The longtime friends had reportedly agreed last December not to attack each other on the campaign trail. The rules for the debate are as follows. Candidates will have 1 minute to respond to questions from the moderator and 30 seconds to respond when mentioned by another candidate. Unlike the last debate, candidates will not be asked to raise their hands in support of a specific idea or go down the line with one-word answers to a question. Additionally, to cut down on crosstalk, CNN says that it will reduce a candidate's time if they consistently interrupt others. Well, joining me now, Catilin Huey-Burns in Detroit, Antjuan Seawright and Leslie Sanchez are on set with me. Catilin, of course, a CBSN political reporter, Antjuan, a CBSN political contributor and Democratic strategist, and Leslie Sanchez, contributor and Republican strategist as well. Catilin, if I can start with you. So we know that you've got these two sort of progressive icons going toe-to-toe. They've agreed not to, hit each other over the head. What are you watching for with these two? How do they separate themselves?
Right. These are two candidates who aren't really that far apart on policy, but are representing a part of the party that wants to take a more aggressive approach to kind of reimagining institutions as it pertains to the economy, as it pertains to politics. So they're very similar on policy. The differences might be on rhetoric and approach. And what I'm watching for tonight is whether they decide to go after one another, particularly whether Bernie Sanders decides to go after Elizabeth Warren. Talking to the Bernie Sanders campaign in the past, we know the senator doesn't like to go after his rivals personally, but he does like to draw contrasts on policy. When it comes to Elizabeth Warren, there's not a huge difference between them on that front. But Bernie Sanders has been losing ground over the past several weeks in our polling and in others, losing ground to people like Elizabeth Warren, who has been surging in the polls slowly but steadily. Does he see a threat from her? I think we'll get a good idea of that tonight if he decides to draw contrast with her or if he decides to keep the focus on President Trump.
Antjuan, I want to turn to you. Last go around, people were like, Bernie is just too way far left. He's just too progressive. Now you see him as somewhat of a more palatable candidate for others who might not have viewed him last go around. What does he and Elizabeth Warren need to do tonight?
Well, I think this is a battle for second place. The polls have indicated, poll after poll, Biden is the clear front runner. So this is not only a battle for second place, but a battle for what type of progressive message we'll try to run today within the party. I said earlier that tonight will be a real fight for or display for what the heart and soul of our party is like. You have two of the strongest second place candidates between Bernie and Warren with their progressive message. And for the most part, everyone else on the stage is what I would identify as center left. So I think we're going to see that. And I think you'll try to see Bernie go a little farther progressive to try to put some differences between he and Elizabeth Warren in terms of a policy position. But don't look for Bernie to attack Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah. Look
for him to not attack, but highlight the differences between he and Mayor Pete and people like Beto O'Rourke, who are, I think, on political life support at this point in terms of fighting for will they go to the next debate, et cetera. And also look for them to give a knockout punch to Steve Bullock, who is his first debate.
Leslie, when you talk about the state of Michigan, which is where this debate's going to take place, right. Bernie Sanders won the Democratic primary in the state by something like 1.4%. But this was a state that was actually carried by President Trump. What do these Democratic primary voters want? Do we have a sense?
I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. Here's the first swing state that you're going into where you're really going to get a sense of where is the Democratic Party going. I think Antjuan's right. You're going to have many messengers, but they're singing off the same song sheet in the sense they've all pulled to the left. It's a very progressive agenda, not what you saw coming out of the candidates candidates who were competitive in battleground states, meaning the Democrats, in 2018. So is it going to be kind of a lot of regurgitating, not as kind of a pejorative, but a lot of the same health care messages that Bernie Sanders talked about, certainly education, financial aid messages that Bernie Sanders talked about? Is it really his playbook? And how does a candidate differentiate themselves in a swing state where you have a lot of working class voters who are right now attuned to President Trump but still consider themselves Democrats?
I want to get to Catilin. Catilin, you just interviewed one of the candidates in tonight's debate, former Maryland Congressman John Delaney, on health care, which we were just talking about. I want to play that bite for you.
Well, health care is the #1 issue affecting the American people. And Senator Sanders has a plan. Senator Warren has basically outsourced her health care plan to him, as have many of the other candidates. And it's a terrible plan. It's a terrible plan. It's bad policy, and we'll lose to Donald Trump if we run on it. So yes, I plan on making that point, that Medicare for All is bad policy and it's bad politics. And in many ways, it's part of what a lot of these candidates are running on, which is impossible promises or kind of slogans posing as policy.
Catilin, both Sanders and Warren co-sponsored the same Medicare for All bill in the Senate. And just yesterday, California Senator Kamala Harris released what she calls a Medicare for All plan. How do these two proposals really compare?
Well, Kamala Harris's plan, introduced this week, has a longer period of time where people would phase into the program, and she also opens up opportunities for private insurance to play a role in Medicare. And she's invited a lot of critics with this proposal, from people like Joe Biden, who say she's not being realistic about the cost of this and what it would mean for taxpayers, and then people like Bernie Sanders and potentially Elizabeth Warren, who don't think it goes far enough and does enough to provide a Medicare for All plan. Healthcare is a top issue of concern for Democrats across the country. We heard that over and over on the campaign trail. You're seeing a debate in the party about how to move forward on that. People like Joe Biden say, let's build on Obamacare as it exists, add something like a public option. Others like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and some others wanting to reframe the whole entire system, because that's where they believe the energy is. But in our CBS News polling, what's really interesting to see is that primary voters and likely caucus goers don't really care much about the big differences on policy between these candidates, among all these candidates, but they prefer someone who can defeat Donald Trump. So that's kind of the lens through which a lot of these voters are going to be watching the debate tonight and tomorrow night. Less focused on these differences, more focused on finding someone who they believe can be successful and win next November.
Antjuan, Michigan is a swing state, to her point about, electability.
Well, it's a swing state, and I think my dear friend Leslie is so right about it being a swing state, that Trump won in 16, but Democrats won in 18. Into the conversation on health care, the one thing we knew, and the governor of Michigan proved this because I was heavily involved in her race, is the fact that a pragmatic message won the day in Michigan. That's why we have a clean slate of Democratic candidates who now hold statewide office in Michigan. It wasn't the Medicare for All position. It wasn't what the right wing would try to identify as ultra progressive. It was campaign issues, campaign promises that you see tend to top the charts in today and the things we won on in 2018. So I think you will hear most candidates try to reframe and reposition themselves to really speak to what worked in 2018 for Democrats on the messaging front.
You mentioned the current Michigan governor. I want to play a bite for you from an interview.
And is that what you attribute 2018 to? Trump only won the state by 11,000 votes, or fewer than 11,000 votes in 2016. You were able to boost turnout. What do you attribute that to? Is it a reaction to the president? Is it a reaction to candidates?
I think people saw that elections really did matter, and you cannot take anyone or anything for granted. As a candidate, I went into all 83 counties in Michigan, and this is a huge state. But I did it because I think it's critical to show up. When you show up and you actually listen, you can't stray from the things that matter because you're listening and you're learning every day. Stay focused on the things that really matter. People in Michigan don't care about the president's Twitter feed. We care about feeding our families. We care about ensuring that our kids can have a better quality of life than we have. And we've got a lot of work to do, but I think that's what we want. We're hardworking, good people. We want a president who can get things done for us.
Caitlin, that was your interview with the governor. So do you get the sense on the ground there that these so-called kitchen table issues are going to be front and center?
Well, the governor was saying that her roadmap for 2020 Democrats is to focus on economic and local issues. She ran her campaign, as Antjuan was alluding to, by focusing on things that were important to Michigan. She had an ad in which she called for fixing the damn roads, very much focused on infrastructure and kind of these bread and butter kitchen table issues that she said were effective. She was able to flip 9 counties. Democrats won 5 statewide seats there and flipped 2 congressional seats in 2018. The question, though, is now that Trump's back on the ballot in 2020, how do Democrats figure their coalition in a state like Michigan, what that's going to look like? Do they try to boost out turnout in places like Detroit, where we're standing, these more diverse areas where Hillary Clinton underperformed Barack Obama in 2016? A lot of people here say that that could have made the big difference here in Michigan. Or do you focus on trying to win back those independent voters, those who, voters in Macomb County, for example, who flipped for Trump from Democrats to Republicans in 2016? Do you try to win back those voters? That's what they're trying to figure out now. I talked to the Democratic Party chair here in Michigan, and she said they're trying to do both at once. What they learned from 2016, though, is that you have to be here. So that's the message that they're sending to the candidates who are here in Detroit. It's nice that you're here for this debate. We welcome you, but you need to come back. That's the message they're trying to send.
You have to be here, a message for many states that a lot of candidates will be hearing. Interesting to hear you break that down. I want to thank you all. We're going to unfortunately have to leave it there. Catilin Huey-Burns, Antjuan Seawright, and Leslie Sanchez. Thank you.